for pretty much every other college football situation, you don't have to read between the lines or almost decode messages quite like you do in spring practice. What comes out of spring practice is essentially only what coaches want you to know, and you don't get a whole lot of real, tangible, great info to operate off of. And I think it's important to remember that because sometimes you get in this situation where, and we're all excited for football, we're all excited for spring practice, we're all fighting off the anticipation of what the upcoming college football season will look like, feel like, and nobody wants to be surprised. You want to have some semblance of an idea of what that looks like in 2024. And I get it. I understand the excitement completely, 100%. The somewhat issue becomes is you kind of telling an incomplete story, and the only information that's out there is the information that they want you to have out there. And so I encourage you to somewhat pump the brakes on being super encouraged, excited, whatever the case may be, when it comes to spring practice reports, because I think every program is different, right? Every program wants different things out of spring practice, depending on where they are in their program's development, where they are in their coaches' development, etc. For instance, at a place like Ohio State, where like Chip Kelly is coming in as a new offensive coordinator, where Ohio State has had offensive coordinators in the past in name only. Ryan Day was the one calling the plays. Chip Kelly is coming in and is going to call the plays for Ohio State. And so in a spring practice where maybe you might expect it's more personal development, more position by position development, it becomes one side of the football development where you want to get everybody on the same page so when August comes around, you can hit the ground running for fall practice. And while it is personal development, is still going to be position by position development is still going to be important. And those are going to be where the majority of the nuggets and information that you get come from. Our position coaches or coordinators telling you like, hey, this guy's playing really well this spring, or he's really made a step up, or whatever the case may be. Very rarely, if ever, in spring practice are you going to hear something along the lines of, yeah, this guy's struggling. It's not going well. And when you do, it's almost it's probably not as true as that position coach, coordinator, head coach is trying to motivate that young buck to like, hey, I need you to be a little bit higher level than what you're performing at right now. And so I need you to kick things up a notch. And if you haven't done that, you haven't done that. But this idea that you can tell a whole lot about one team's spring practice or another team's spring practice, I don't necessarily believe. It's sort of like to compare it to an apples to oranges comparison. It's sort of like in high school football, you get scrimmages between, maybe a good school and a bad school. And like, oh, well, the bad school scored 3 touchdowns to 1 against the good school. Yeah, everybody's treating things differently. In a scrimmage, you might like, hey, we're going to practice these 8 plays because I want to see us run them against another team other than the guys on our scout team. While another team might say, we're going to treat this like a game. This is going to be a dress rehearsal for week 1, where spring practice could be, we're going to go all in on taking all of the hours that we have available in the spring to working to make sure position by position we are improving position by position, rather than making sure offensively we are cohesive and know exactly what we're getting into, exactly what we want to do, exactly who we are. Or defensively, you might look at like, hey, our defensive line, we want to work on pass rushing because we weren't good enough there in 2023, rather than, okay, here's what we're going to practice. We're going to go 11 on 11. Like, you just don't. And each school is different. Each school will do will prioritize things depending on who they are, where they are, what they want to accomplish. And there's no right or wrong answer. It's just for instance, you get those way too early Associated Press top 25 poll or whatever. And things will change in that based on spring practice. Wait a second. Outside of the transfer portal or National Signing Day, those teams haven't changed a whole lot from the end of 2023. So you've known for a while who you feel like is going to be the number one team in the poll, the number two team, the top 5, top 10, 15, 20, 25. You have that already kind of set in stone. And for anything other than a gigantic, catastrophic injury to a star player or an important player, i.e., if Jordan Travis was to go down for Florida State in the preseason or someone similar of that stature, then sure, that can affect their ranking in the preseason top 25. But that kind of jockeying for position has always dumbfounded me a little bit of like, oh, well, it's spring practice reports. They said they're not running the football very well against the scout team. Well, who gives a damn? They don't need to run the ball well against the scout team. It's March. We got time to figure this out. So I caution those who put a ton of stock, because we've seen kind of spring game Heisman winners or people who the expectations due to spring practice reports, either from the limited sessions that media could watch or teammates saying like, yo, this guy is playing really well. He's balling out and you should expect a big season from them. And then you're like, well, wait a second. What the hell happened to that guy once the season rolls around? So I'm very rarely I'm like, hey, let's pump the brakes on some excitement or hype. But I just know that it's kind of like a perfect storm of like, okay, we haven't had football in a couple of months. We haven't had really on-field stuff to talk about since New Year's Day or the national championship game the week after. And so after a 2-month respite, all I want to do is talk about this guy tandem blocking that guy, working up to the backer and making sure, like, I understand that. But it's this perfect storm of a situation where you haven't had on the field talk for a while, coupled with excitement, anticipation, where it's, like opening day for Major League Baseball fans. Everybody has hope and anticipation, and your season hasn't been completely ruined yet by the fact that you've got a low payroll or an incompetent manager or a GM who doesn't know his ass from a hole in the ground. You've been in that spot, and college football is in a similar spot where spring practice, everybody has hope. Everybody believes that this could be the year that things really look up for them, that things could get better, that if you feel like you've been on the downturn, spring practice allows you to think about what could be, what might be, what is possible, what's on the horizon. You have that opportunity, that optimism. And so naturally, that optimism is infused with flat out positivity at all times. And I assure you, not everything that comes out of spring practice, like at the end of those 15 practices, there are some head coaches that will say like, crap. One, things don't look good, or we have a really big problem here, or whatever the case may be. It's not all positive. But to kind of crap on that anticipation, that optimism in spring practice, it makes you look like a real Debbie Downer. Believe me, I'm doing it right now, and I realize that it looks like a real Debbie Downer that you're saying like, hey, I know you feel excited and encouraged about the upcoming season, but you shouldn't. Is a hell of a spot to be in. But I'm just saying, keep that in mind of, one, you're only getting one side of the story. And that side of the story is going to be incredibly, insanely optimistic and encouraging. Nobody's going to come out of spring practice, because essentially if you come out of spring practice as a coach and you feel like you either didn't get the things done that you wanted to get done, or I can't wait for August to come because I could wait for August to come because we got a lot of work to do. You sound like you didn't do your job. If you say there were some things we wanted to get done in these practices that I didn't get done, you basically are saying like, hey, I kind of suck at my job. And nobody's going to come out and say that. So it's all encouraging, all optimistic. And I'm just saying, take that just a little bit with a grain of salt, because it's not 100% positive. out of spring practice. Now, that's not to say that it's not overwhelming positive. It's not overwhelmingly optimistic, overwhelmingly encouraging. But there is going to be some, we got some issues there that you're probably just not going to hear about until after the first game. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content that's coming out of Saturday Glory. If you are listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. Goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow right here on the Daily Huddle.